A reputable judge sentences a 12-year-old child to 70 years in prison because he feels that guilty, but when a long-lost piece of evidence comes to light, it exposes a system of corruption so extensive that it upends the court system to its core. The San Marcos, Texas courthouse was crowded that day, and the air was heavy, not only with the stifling summer heat, but everyone's eyes were on Judge because of the impending delivery of the decision. Harold Cranston was a man who was well known for his unwavering legal convictions and uncompromising judgments. Judge Cranston, who was 68 years old and had served for almost 40 years, had come to represent authority and fairness in the small community. His face on the bench was marked by the lines of a man who had witnessed every crime and every request for mercy from the defendant. 12-year-old Caleb Warner, a slender man with wide eyes, stood at the defense table with shaky hands. Caleb had brown eyes that appeared to take in everything around him, even though he was still young. Older, as though the world's burden had already been placed on his tiny shoulders, he had kept his. Innocent from the beginning, even though he was taken into custody for robbing a convenience store with a gun, leaving the clerk in serious condition, yet his voice would be irrelevant today. Cranston, the Master Warner judge, started his powerful baritone filling. Standing in this room, found guilty by a jury of your peers of crimes that have permanently damaged this community. Your activities, deliberate and careless actions, have resulted in significant damage. Sitting in the back row, the boy's mother choked back a sob, had begged the court to consider Caleb as more than a case number in order to see the kid she had raised. Loved science and aspired to be an astronaut, but the evidence was stronger than the shaky eyewitness reports. Caleb's face was sealed by security footage and an anonymous tip. "I give you a sentence of 70 years in state custody." The sound of Cranston's gavel hitting the oak block reverberated like a last heartbeat. Caleb got up. He remained still, his lips squeezed into a thin line as though he was suppressing words or tears that would have no effect on the surroundings. Burst into whispers, gasps, and reporters' frantic scrawling. Caleb looked over at his mum once. Judge Cranston's shaken footsteps vanished the last time he was brought away, leaving just quiet in his wake. It had been a hard day. He went to his chambers and poured himself a cup of black coffee while gazing at its swirling surface. However, he felt that justice had been done, although a slight uneasiness and a glimmer of doubt persisted, which he promptly brushed aside. Exhaustion. He was unaware that the facts he had just buried would soon resurface. The trial had been a local news outlets have termed this spectacle the Warner case. The Parker's Corner store heist had taken public notice due to its repercussions as well as its audacity. The store had been overrun by a masked assailant on a peaceful Tuesday night, armed with a pistol, making off with $5,000 in cash and goods. Harold Peters, the store clerk, was shot during the heist and was left battling for his life due to the mayhem. After receiving an anonymous tip, the police arrested 7th grader Caleb Warner, who had no prior records. 2 weeks later, items like those in the damning picture that Yushin created were found in a storage locker belonging to Caleb. Eyewitnesses claimed to have heard Caleb's voice, and surveillance film captured a man with a similar build during the crime. Matched the suspects. The fingerprints on the firearm left behind, which matched Caleb's defense, were the most incriminating of all. Overworked and underfunded, the lawyer found it difficult to refute the overwhelming amount of proof that Caleb claimed, "I didn't do this." When his older brother, the only possible witness, acknowledged he hadn't, his alibi fell apart, even though I was home that evening, seeing Caleb for hours that night, and the jury returned with a guilty verdict in less than 4 hours of deliberation. When the fourers read the verdict, Caleb didn't flinch, but his jaw tightening revealed his internal conflict. Being unbiased and always ready to impose what he believed to be a just punishment, Cranston had witnessed criminals of all types and Caleb was the same to him. Although it was evident that the sentence was appropriate, Cranston signed the sentencing documents that night. A persistent idea regarding the case felt unfinished, and the weeks turned into months. While the judge waited for Caleb to be transferred to a high-security facility, he remained in juvenile detention. Cranston's life went on as usual until one calm afternoon, when an unremarkable file appeared on his desk. One name struck his attention, even though it was part of an unrelated police misconduct probe: Warner, Caleb. Cranston frowned and flipped over the pages of the file, which described an evidence log from a separate case involving a weapon. A handgun that resembled the one used in the Parker's Corner store robbery. The trouble with this gun was seized in an unrelated arrest days before Caleb's alleged crime. Cranston slumped back in his chair, his pulse quickening. If the firearm was already in police custody, it couldn't have been utilized in the crime. He cross-referenced the serial number with Caleb's trial paperwork. It was an identical match, and a chilly realization came over him. The evidence against Caleb was poor, probably manufactured. Cranston demanded the complete case filing for an unconnected arrest. When it arrived, it painted a terrible image of the arresting officer, Detective Alan Ruiz, was also the primary investigator in Caleb's case. Determined to learn the truth, Cranston called. During a late-night coffee rendezvous in a cafe on the outskirts of town, Cranston lay out his findings. "This isn't negligence," Greer remarked, his voice quiet but strong. "This is a setup." Together began to explore. Within weeks, they uncovered fraudulent reports, manipulated witness testimony, and a worrying pattern. Detective Ruiz's actions was observed by one witness, a teenage clerk who initially identified another suspect, that he had been coerced into changing his evidence. "Ruiz informed me that if I didn't cooperate, I'd be charged with accomplice," the boy confessed. The final piece of the puzzle came when Gray was able to recover deleted correspondence from Ruiz's police account. One email addressed to the district attorney described a plan to achieve a conviction in Caleb's case. Complete with falsified evidence attached was a list of modified goods, including the weapon and fingerprints. Cranston's hands trembled as he read the document. The system he had dedicated his life to was horribly flawed, but there was no time for despair. He had the proof he required to act. Cranston submitted a motion to reopen Caleb's case, attaching damning evidence against Ruiz. The motion sent shockwaves across the courthouse. Some commended Cranston's guts, while others questioned his motivations. The retaliation was swift and personal. Anonymous threats filled his phone, and his tires were slashed. When a message was left on his car, "Drop it or else." But Cranston was resolute. The youngster he had sentenced deserved justice. Detective Ruiz refuted the claims, calling them a frivolous attack on his career. However, as the inquiry developed, on the night of the crime, surveillance footage from a parking lot near the store revealed a male matching Ruiz's description, carrying a duffel bag. The implication was apparent that Ruiz had arranged the robbery, framed Caleb to hide his tracks. Cranston called for an emergency hearing. The courtroom was crowded, and the footage gasps reverberated through the crowd. As the reality became clear, this man, Cranston claimed, pointing to the screen, twisted evidence, forced witnesses, and framed an innocent youngster. "We failed, Caleb Warner. It's time to make things right, Ruiz. I was detained while sitting in the gallery, the location where you have no idea what you've..." He started hissing as he was dragged away. Caleb was convicted weeks later. Overturned. The courtroom erupted in applause when the boy was liberated from his mother, clutched to him, tears flowing down her face. Cranston watched from the rear. A rare smile softens his features. Justice had triumphed, but it came at. The fallout from the case was costly. Ruiz faced criminal charges. A federal probe into the San Marcos Police Department revealed substantial corruption in Cranston's conduct triggered nationwide calls for reform. Caleb's story became a beacon of hope. Despite his accolades, Cranston remained introspective. He had seen the system's problem firsthand and resolved to spend the art. He spent the remainder of his career pushing for change. Caleb's journey was merely. Initially, he dedicated himself to assisting those who have been wrongly convicted. Individuals are becoming symbols of resilience and pursuit of truth. Their story served as a reminder that justice demands diligence, courage, and that, even in the darkest circumstances, truth can prevail.